In the early morning hours of December 8, 2025, at precisely 3:11 a.m., Moscow experienced what military analysts are calling the most sophisticated, coordinated, unmanned aerial assault in modern warfare history. 68 drones executed a precision strike against Russia's busiest aviation facility. But this wasn't a conventional, overwhelming force attack. Instead, it represented something far more insidious, a calculated psychological operation that systematically dismantled one of the world's most advanced air defense networks through mental exhaustion rather than brute force. The attack's success hinged on a 9-day preliminary campaign that transformed Russian air defense operators from vigilant sentinels into exhausted, doubt-ridden decision-makers. Through persistent deployment of deceptive signals and inexpensive wooden decoys, Ukrainian forces created an operational environment where genuine threats could slip through undetected. This operation demonstrated how relatively modest investments in tactical deception could neutralize defensive systems worth billions of dollars. The strike package. Approximately 1 hour before impact, at 2:13 a.m., the assault force assembled in a frozen agricultural area near Konotop, Ukraine, positioned roughly 298 miles from the Kremlin. The strike package consisted of 24 Lyutyi drones, each equipped with a 50-horsepower propulsion system similar to premium recreational vehicles and carrying 75 pounds of explosive payload. Though appearing rudimentary in construction, these aircraft represented sophisticated engineering optimized for their specific mission. Accompanying the primary strike drones were 44 Rubaka single-use attack vehicles flying in a dispersed formation. From their control facility in Kyiv, Ukrainian operators viewed their objective, Sheremetyevo Airport, highlighted on tactical displays. However, their mission extended beyond disrupting civilian aviation. Intelligence had identified a recent delivery of critical S-400 air defense components from Kursk, making the airport's cargo facilities a high-value military target. The tactical challenge appeared insurmountable. Between the strike force and their objective lay 9 separate Russian air defense installations, including advanced Panzer S-1 systems and long-range S-400 batteries. Conventional military doctrine suggested that propeller-driven aircraft attempting to penetrate such defenses would face near-certain destruction. Operation Advent Calendar. 9 days of psychological warfare. The December 8th strike actually commenced 9 days earlier through what became known as Operation Advent Calendar, a masterclass in desensitization tactics. Ukrainian forces initiated a sustained campaign deploying what operators termed beaver decoys, inexpensive wooden aircraft barely capable of flight, but enhanced with a $50 component called a Lundberg lens. This simple radar reflector possessed the remarkable property of returning radio wave signals with extraordinary intensity. To Russian radar operators monitoring their screens, these plywood constructions appeared as genuine combat aircraft, potentially even advanced fighters. The result was a systematic conditioning program executed with high explosives and psychological precision. During the initial 72 hours, Russian responses demonstrated near-panic levels of engagement. Every radar contact triggered full defensive salvos. The airspace above Moscow's suburbs erupted with defensive fire resembling massive fireworks displays. Panzer batteries exhausted entire ammunition loads, 12 missiles simultaneously, pursuing these phantom threats. The economic calculus was devastating for Russian forces. They expended millions of dollars in sophisticated munitions, destroying targets that cost mere hundreds to construct. Russian military social media channels celebrated these successful interceptions, posting footage of destroyed decoys while believing they had repelled major assault waves. In reality, they were hemorrhaging critical resources. By the 5th night, logistical strain became evident. Ammunition resupply vehicles operated continuous shifts maintaining launcher readiness. The sustained firing caused physical damage to weapon systems, with 30mm autocannon barrels warping from excessive thermal stress. But the most significant damage occurred within command vehicles, where human operators struggled with mounting fatigue. By nights 7 and 8, operational patterns shifted noticeably. Operators began hesitating before engagement. Each new radar contact prompted the question, is this genuine, or am I about to waste another missile shipment on a flying piece of lumber? This hesitation created a critical psychological vulnerability, a blind spot in defensive awareness. For 9 consecutive nights, Russian crews tracked these phantoms. They stared at their displays for over 200 hours straight. Equipment ran at maximum operational capacity, nerves frayed. Biologically, their reaction times degraded by approximately 4 seconds. In the microsecond world of supersonic missile interception, this 4-second delay represented an insurmountable tactical disadvantage. Tonight, that accumulated exhaustion would become Ukraine's primary weapon. The real attack begins. At 2:40 a.m., the genuine strike force, 24 heavy Lyutyi drones with 44 Rubaka escorts, maintained extremely low altitude through the Bryansk forest region. Flying at just 120 feet, they exploited Earth's curvature to remain beneath radar detection horizons. Environmental conditions provided unexpected advantages. Heavy snowfall across the Moscow region created what radar specialists call backscatter, millions of tiny frozen water crystals acting as reflectors, generating screen clutter that obscured genuine targets. Russian defensive systems finally activated to full touchscreen capability. The Panzer S-1, a $15 million weapon system specifically designed to counter such threats, brought its X-band radar online, capable of simultaneously tracking 20 targets with 12 ready missiles. Supporting it was the Krasuka-4 electronic warfare platform, a mobile jamming system capable of disrupting radio communications across an 186-mile radius. Russian commanders, recognizing this wasn't another decoy run, activated maximum defensive power. The electronic battle commenced immediately. The 44 Rubaka drones pushed forward aggressively, creating thermal signatures and chaotic movement patterns. The Panzer fire control computers, already stressed from 9 days of continuous operations, struggled to process targeting priorities amid snow clutter and multiple contacts. At 2:48 a.m., Russian forces deployed their electronic warfare advantage. The Krasuka-4 unleashed broadband jamming. In the Ukrainian control bunker, displays went blank. Satellite links severed. GPS signals were spoofed, falsely indicating the drones had somehow transported themselves over the Atlantic Ocean. By conventional expectations, the swarm should have become disoriented and crashed. Adaptive technology defeats. Jamming Ukrainian engineers had anticipated precisely this scenario. When GPS signals disappeared, the drones didn't panic, they adapted. All 24 Lyutyi drones and remaining Rubaka escorts executed a programmed protocol shift from satellite navigation to optical terrain matching systems. The concept parallels human navigation. When electronic guidance fails, visual landmarks provide orientation. The drones activated onboard cameras, scanning terrain below and comparing observed roads, tree lines, and structures against preloaded satellite imagery stored in internal memory. They no longer required GPS or radio control, only visual recognition. Then they executed a terrifying maneuver, reducing altitude from 120 feet to just 50 feet above ground, true nap of the earth flight. At this height, they physically weaved between pine trees. To Russian Panzer radars, the drones merged with the forest itself. Ground clutter became absolute. Radar systems couldn't distinguish carbon fiber drones from wind-blown trees. At 2:56 a.m., Russian command structure fractured. Panic replaced disciplined protocol. Panzer crews, realizing their radar systems were effectively blind against tree-hugging targets, made a desperate decision. If they couldn't achieve individual target locks, they would create an impenetrable steel barrier, They switched from track-while scan to manual optical engagement with a simple order: free fire, clear the sector. The night sky above Moscow's suburbs erupted. 9 Panzer batteries unleashed simultaneous volleys. Missiles accelerated to Mach 3 within 2 seconds. But the real devastation came from twin 30mm autocannons, each firing 20,500 rounds per minute, a continuous river of high-explosive incendiary tracers cutting through darkness. Sacrifice and strategy. Here, the mathematics of sacrifice became apparent. The 44 Rubaka drones were never intended to reach the airport. They were expendable pieces. Their programming had them fly slightly higher at 25 feet, deliberately emitting louder acoustic signatures. They were the matadors waving red capes, and the Panzer systems charged directly at them. The initial defensive volley proved devastating. 12 Rubakas vaporized instantly, transformed into aluminum fragments. But the remaining 32 didn't scatter or retreat. They accelerated directly into the gunfire. It was brutal attrition warfare. One by one, Rubakas were destroyed, some by proximity fuses, others shredded by 30mm shells. But each destroyed Rubaka meant one less Russian missile available. Each crashed drone meant another Panzer barrel heading toward critical failure. By 3:05 a.m., the last Rubaka spiraled into a snowbank and exploded. Silence returned. Russian operators, physically exhausted and trembling, examined their displays. 44 targets engaged, 44 targets destroyed, 100% kill rate. They began celebrating, convinced they had successfully defended the airport. They were catastrophically wrong. They hadn't defended anything. They had simply emptied their magazines. While Russians were busy destroying the pawns, the 24 Lyutyi drones, the queens on this chessboard, executed a hard banking turn. Using the chaos and thermal signatures of their burning decoys as concealment, they dropped to a suicidal 10 feet above ground, skimming just inches above power lines. The Rubakas were gone, their mission accomplished. But they had purchased exactly 4 minutes of silence, the time required for Panzer crews to reload. The Lyutyi needed only 3 minutes to cover the remaining distance. The path to the runway now stood wide open. Final approach and impact. At 3:09 a.m., 2 minutes before impact, the battlefield fell into eerie silence. Panzer crews experienced adrenaline crashes, busy celebrating and waiting for resupply trucks with fresh ammunition. They believed the sky was empty. But 50 feet above the tree line, the 24 Lyutyi drones suddenly pitched upward. This maneuver was calculated. To penetrate reinforced concrete runways, shallow angles are ineffective. Steep dives are required. The drones climbed to 400 feet, exposing themselves to radar for the first time in an hour. Russian radar screens illuminated instantly. 24 fresh contacts appeared directly above the airfield. The commander of the nearest Panzer battery stared at his screen in horror, screaming for his gunner to engage. The gunner froze. His digital ammunition counter read 0. Missile tubes were empty. He pressed the firing pedal repeatedly, receiving only the dry clicking of an empty weapon system. Battery 2, positioned further north, still possessed 2 missiles. The operator didn't wait for target lock. He fired both. One missed, confusing a burning trash container for a drone engine signature. The second found its mark, clipping Lyutyi No. 7's wing. The drone spun violently, lost lift, and crashed harmlessly into a snowbank 50 yards short of the fuel storage area. Meanwhile, Russian airfield security personnel, armed with automatic rifles, opened panic fire from the tarmac. They filled the air with uncoordinated gunfire, mostly noise, but sheer volume sometimes achieves results. 2 more drones flew into the wall of bullets. One disintegrated mid-air. The other lost its guidance computer and careened into an empty baggage cart, exploding uselessly. 21 drones remained. For Sheremetyevo, that was 21 too many. Inside the surviving drone's logic boards, artificial intelligence executed final programming. Terminal guidance. Optical sensors scanned downward, ignoring jamming and snow, searching for high-contrast straight lines. The two main runways, 07R and 25L, shone like beacons against dark ground. The AI designated target zones. At 3:11 a.m., the lead Lyutyi rolled inverted and dove, striking runway 07R's center at 180 mph. The 75-pound warhead featured a delayed action fuse. It didn't explode on contact. Instead, it punched through the asphalt surface layer, burying itself deep into the subgrade before detonating. The explosion heaved concrete upward, creating not just a crack, but an excavation. A crater 25 feet wide and 8 feet deep. Seconds later, 3 more drones slammed into runway 25L. The double tap. Both main arteries of Moscow's aviation hub were severed. Nothing could land. Nothing could take off. The remaining 17 drones weren't targeting runways. They hunted logistics. 4 Lyutyi drones veered sharply toward the northern fuel farm, slamming into jet fuel storage tanks. The impact ignited 40,000 gallons of aviation fuel instantly. The fireball rose 200 feet, turning night into day. That massive pillar of black, oily smoke wasn't merely dramatic. It was tactical. The smoke drifted across the airfield, creating a thermal wall that completely blinded remaining infrared sensors. The final wave of 13 drones used this smokescreen to locate the cargo terminal. They dove into the loading bay where crates marked for military use were waiting. The explosions were contained and muffled, but devastatingly effective. 3 drones were lost in the final assault, but 21 found their targets. In 60 seconds, Moscow's impenetrable fortress had been transformed into a burning wreck. Russian operators could only watch the flames and listen to sirens, knowing they had wasted all their ammunition shooting wooden toys while the real killers walked through the front door. Strategic impact. 4 layers of pain. The smoke was still clearing over Sheremetyevo, but the strike's real impact wasn't measured in craters or burnt fuel. It was measured in 4 distinct layers of cascading damage radiating outward from Moscow. Immediate operational paralysis. Within the first hour, 212 flights were canceled. 8 civilian airliners sustained shrapnel damage and were grounded indefinitely. Direct financial losses approached $110 million in a single morning. For an economy already strained by international sanctions, this represented a substantial blow. Military supply chain disruption. The cargo terminal crates contained critical guidance chips for 12 new S-400 batteries destined for the Kursk front. Those chips were now destroyed. This meant 3 entire air defense regiments would sit idle in their barracks for at least 11 days. 11 days where the skies over front lines would be dangerously vulnerable. Strategic force redeployment. Putin now faced an impossible dilemma. To prevent repetition of this attack, he had to withdraw Panzer systems from front lines to fortify Moscow. But every battery moved to Sheremetyevo was a battery not protecting the southern sectors. Ukraine was counting on precisely this response. Exploiting the opening. Just 42 hours after this strike, while Moscow scrambled to redeploy its defenses, Ukrainian aircraft launched precision attacks on vital bridges in the south. They faced zero resistance. The path was clear because the guards had been called home to protect the king. Conclusion. The new reality of air defense. The night of December 8, 2025, fundamentally challenged assumptions about modern air defense invincibility. It demonstrated that when one side learns to weaponize weather conditions, employ artificial intelligence for autonomous navigation, and transform patience into a strategic asset, no fortress remains impregnable indefinitely. This operation revealed that the future of aerial warfare may not belong to the side with the most advanced technology, but to the side that best understands human psychology, operational fatigue, and the art of deception. The most expensive defense systems in the world proved vulnerable not to superior firepower, but to a carefully orchestrated campaign that exploited the human element, the exhausted operators behind the screens. The question now facing military strategists globally is whether Russia will double down on defending Moscow, pulling more resources from active combat zones, or risk the front lines to maintain offensive capabilities. Either choice represents a strategic victory for Ukraine, proof that sometimes the most effective weapons aren't measured in explosive yield, but in their ability to force impossible decisions upon your adversary.